everyone. Good morning, YouTube. Good morning, Facebook. It is Tuesday, not our normal day, but it is Tuesday at 9:30. We have a very special live for everyone today. We are here with Jennifer Worthen. Jennifer is our featured designer this month for Cotton Cuts.
Yay!
So I know,
Yay!
so I know the first question was like, what does that mean, right? And so let me explain a little bit about what it means to be a featured designer for us. So each month, Cotton Cuts picks a designer, a quilt pattern designer that's out there doing great and amazing and inspiring things, and we feature them in our boxes. And so every purchase of a classic box or of a modern maker box, you receive in your box this fancy little card, and it has this beautifully awesome headshot of Jennifer. And it's actually like in your shop. So like don't look too close because that's actually like in where we are today. It gives a little bio. It gives how to find the designer of the month. And on the back, we have the best part. I'm going to hide the code. You get your choice of pattern download from that month's featured designer. So I know we've talked a little bit about how kind of our boxes came to be. And typically when we put a pattern in a box and sent it out, like you might get it, you might not like that pattern. It might be too easy. It might be too hard. So what we have chosen to do is offer a free pattern download. So you go on the website and you can pick whichever one of these amazing patterns you want and download it, and then you can make it at your own will. And as I'm looking at these patterns, Jennifer, holy cow, we're gonna have a lot to talk about because these are amazing. They're bright and they're beautiful. So without any further ado, so I met Jennifer at Quilt Market when I was at Quilt Market in October, and we were doing like a Taylor Swift friendship bracelet exchange thing. And I gave her a Cotton Cuts one, and she gave me a Slightly Biased, and we've been friendship bracelet friends ever since. And so she agreed to be our featured designer for this month for December. And so Jennifer, why don't you give everyone watching kind of some background about yourself? Tell us how you got into this crazy world of quilting.
Yeah, definitely. I learned how to sew when I was a kid. My mom always sewed when I was growing up, and so I learned on like making pillowcases and pajama shorts and that kind of stuff when I was younger. But I didn't start quilting until I was in grad school. I joined a book club, and some of the members were quilters, and I thought, well, that looks kind of fun. Let me try that. So I ended up getting a bunch of like free fabric off of Craigslist. Little did I know I was using like upholstery fabric instead of quilting cotton. And I tried to make a quilt with that and then figured out what was going wrong and switched over to, quilting cotton, and started making quilts. This was back in 2009, so quite a while ago. And then I just made other people's patterns for a long time. And then during the pandemic, when we were all in lockdown, I thought, why don't I start making my own patterns? I had made a couple of quilts that friends had said, that should be a pattern. You should sell that. So I finally got around to doing that. And now here we are 3 years later and 20 something patterns later. And it's been so much fun.
That's amazing. I my journey is like yours. I was sewing since I was really young. Same thing, college, like engineering, right? Smart kids get together, and all of a sudden, quilting is things that you're doing. And I remember you don't know what you don't know, right? And
Yep.
when you and I were kids and sewing with our mom, like you sewed on whatever machine mom had there. And so, I mean, we had a treadle machine, we had an old, and I didn't know like how to shop for a sewing machine. So my first was like a brother from Walmart, and I fought with that for so long. And just like the upholstery fabric, like you don't know what you don't know
Yep.
until, and my husband was like, you got to have the right tool for the job. And like having the right sewing machine changes, having the right fabric changes everything. And it just completely opens up the world. And I feel you. When you said upholstery fabric, I was like, yeah, I know what that feels like. All right.
Yeah,
So Jennifer, oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I had a cheap brother as well when I first started quilting. I quilted my whole first quilt on that with like a tiny little throat space. Yeah, it was,
Oh
I
gosh.
didn't know what I didn't know.
I would fight with that for forever. And I
Yep.
didn't have a 1/4 inch quilting foot. And I remember I tried quilting quilts for gifts and I didn't have a walking foot. And I'd be like, why
Hmm.
is this all like wonky left and oh, yes, all those things, Jennifer. I completely agree. So on your card, and I didn't know this when we were talking because we would have had more conversations. A PhD in computational science, engineering, and mathematics. So I'm a biomedical engineer. Like, so tell me, connect the dots. PhD in like super technical science, awesome stuff to quilting.
Yeah, it's funny because growing up I was always very technical and I never really felt like I was very artistic. But quilting has really been able to show me that I am, and so that's a really fun transition to make. And then there's math in quilting, getting to figure out the pattern, how you want it to look, and getting all the pieces to fit together right. Sometimes testing a block design takes 2 or 3 tries to get the block to look the way that you want. So you're doing all the math to get that figured out. And it's a lot like just playing with puzzle pieces to get it all together. And I think that's kind of how the two relate for me.
Yeah, I agree. I had a boss who once told me there's a fine line between art and science, and that it to be a really fantastic scientist, you have to have that creative outside the box view on things. You have to be afraid, not afraid to put things in a different configuration and have it fail
Mm-hmm.
and be willing to back it up and try again. And that's just a foundation in science, foundation in art. And I love when I meet people where the intersections coming together. Like I said, textile engineering before we started. That's how I view quilting, is it's textile engineering. Okay, so Jennifer, we have a ton of questions for you today. Some of these came from you, some of them came from our audience. So let's go ahead and jump on into it. So Jennifer, what's your favorite pattern that you've designed and why?
That's a fun question. I think my favorite one that I've designed is the star one called Vela. It's made up of wonky stars, which is really nice because you just get to slap fabric on and sew it. Like there's much less precision, no
Yeah.
seams to match, which is really great. And then once you get all the stars sewn, when you're putting the final top together, it feels like a puzzle. Like I was literally like jumping up and down at my table, like, oh, this is so much fun because you have this piece fits here and this piece fits here, and it's so much fun, especially if you love puzzles. So I think that's my favorite one.
Okay, so I'm looking at it. So this is one of the patterns we're featuring as a download. Just and you're telling me this is easy and fun and can be done, right? This little
Yeah,
star
it's
pattern
quick.
here. You're because that looks to me like I've got, Y seams and I'm gonna have fractional stars. And so you're telling me that is literally sew a star, sew a star, sew a star, and then it all connects together.
Yep, exactly.
That I love it when complex things like that are easy to do. That is fantastic. All right,
That's
Jen. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say that's one of my goals, to always have patterns that are easy to put together. I don't want something that's so frustrating that you're just gonna throw it to the side because you're upset and it's not working right. My goal is always easy and simple but beautiful.
I like that. I like that too. I like at a manageable scale, right? So I've done some programs before and super traditional quilts. It's like make 200 of this unit. And I'm like, oh my God, like my birthday's going to be here before I get 200 of that done. Yes.
Yes,
And
yes.
then because again, the things that you don't know, you know now. The sewing things bigger and trimming them down is a skill that I've been practicing a lot of to get the triangles and all the seams to work correctly. I'm like, once I have to sew 200 things too big and then I cut it down, I'm like, gosh, I'm like watching, 16 episodes of a show and I'm still cutting these fabrics. No, no bueno. Don't like that at all. All right. So, Jennifer, what other work do you do in addition to your quilting business?
So I do have a day job. I'm a product manager at a software company. I do use all of my math degrees over there too. So that's what I do during the day, and then Slightly Biased Quilts is, on the side in the evenings and weekends, having fun doing that.
Yeah, Cotton Cuts was an evening and weekend project for me too. It was like every night up until like 2 a.m. So we watched It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia on repeat. And it'd be like, and then we'd wake up the next morning and go to work and then rinse and repeat. I get it. I love it and I appreciate it. And I love that. I mean, not everyone can do that, right? You work that full-time job and you just want to come home and veg and just eat dinner and sleep on the couch.
Yep, yep.
I admire that a lot, Jennifer. That's awesome. All right. So where do you find inspiration in your projects?
That's a fun question. And I think it's different for everybody. For me, I started out with inspiration from quilts that I had always wanted to make. So, for example, I had always wanted to make a bear paw quilt. And so I thought, well, why don't I just design one? And same for, I love star quilts. So I'm always designing star quilts, churn dashes, things like that. And so you'll notice from what I say, a lot of those are traditional blocks. I very often tend to start with a traditional block and then turn it into something my own. So I'll play with it. I'll change sizes. I'll move things around. I'll put them interlocking. I'll separate. It takes quite a few iterations to get a pattern design the way that I want it to look, but it's really fun to start with something traditional and then turn it into something a bit more modern from there. And then that's on top of, nature and architecture and all the other places where it's really easy to get good inspiration from.
I love all of that. So I've described myself as a transitional quilter. I'm not traditional, but I'm not modern. I'm not the like minimalist. I'm going to put a star and have all this empty space that you traditionally associate with modern. But nor am I like brown and wool and the same block repeated over and over again. So I like the taking traditional blocks and playing with scale and inverting colors and making two colors three. That is all, that's a fun space for me to play in, but it's not traditional, it's not modern. So it's fun. That's part of the reason why I was drawn to your patterns at market, because they play in that space where you combine both worlds without being fully immersed in either.
Yep, exactly.
All right, so Jennifer, who do you admire in the quilting industry? It's a big one. There's a lot of people out there, and why? Tell us why.
Yeah, there's so many amazing people in this industry. It's such a fun industry to be a part of. So I've got a few different ones. One fabric designer I recently really love is Stephanie Organez. She has a new line called, I think it's Wandering for Andover, and it is absolutely gorgeous. And I want to buy all of it. It's so beautiful. Maybe one day I'll be a fabric designer and get to make something just as nice. For pattern design, I really love kitchen table quilting, Erica.
Mhm.
She does such a good job at making simple patterns that are still beautiful. Like you can tell they're not overly complex, they're just right in terms of simplicity and easy to do, but they're still very interesting to look at. That's kind of the lane that I try to be into, and so I really appreciate watching her do that.
I think there is something prideful in the, you make something that's really complex looking, but it was easy to do, right? And so I like that, having a milestone that you can achieve, right? If you have a really complicated quilt and it never gets done, that to me is like it's going to hang on you. But if you have a beautiful looking quilt that you were able to achieve, it's a win, it's a success. And I love patterns that are pattern designers that are playing in that space. That's fantastic. And we will have to keep an eye on the Andover collection as well. That's going to get like people off camera are making notes. So fantastic. All right, Jennifer, what future projects are you working on? What's exciting you right now?
Oh, I've got a few. You can see one of them back here. I'm
Yes.
working on a couple of quilts to display at QuiltCon in February, so I'm very excited about that. I'm working on a new pattern for Love Patchwork and Quilting, the magazine. So they reached out to me for that. I'm working on that, and then something else really fun. I've mocked up a pattern based on pom poms, which it
Wait, so
sounds kind
like,
of funny, but it's going to be like rainbowy and beautiful, and I can't wait to get started on it.
all right, so now we got to tear that one apart a little bit. So pom poms. So are you talking about like the synthetic pom poms we played with as kids and made like bears and
Yes, yeah, yeah, the
okay.
little fluffy
Yes.
spheres of fluff.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. All right. And so you have a quilt coming, a quilt pattern that's going to use pom poms as inspiration.
Yes.
Okay, now that we will definitely be looking for it. And so you said QuiltCon. So tell everyone what QuiltCon is, when it is, and it sounds like you're going to have a booth. So to give us all the details.
All right, so QuiltCon is a modern quilt show, and they do it every year, and the location changes every year. In 2024, it's going to be in the end of February in Raleigh, South Carolina, right? South Carolina, North Carolina.
I think it's North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Yeah,
I'm new to the Northeast. I apologize for that.
that's okay. That's
So it's
okay.
going to be in Raleigh, and so they're going to have a big display of all these beautiful quilts that people have submitted to be shown in the show. And then there's a bunch of shopping with vendors, which is always really fun.
Mhm.
Yes, I will have a booth there with my patterns and kits and notions and all kinds of fun stuff. But it's a really fun place to go for inspiration for quilting projects, to meet up with other friends and make new quilty friends. I've been going to QuiltCon since it started in, I think it was 2012 in Austin, and it is just always an amazing time.
It is a lot of fun. The vibe at QuiltCon is different than any other quilt show I've ever been to, because most quilt shows are so focused on retail and like buying, buying, buying. And QuiltCon's all about the experience. And it's about the classes you're taking. And it's about meeting the designer of the quilt that you're looking at. And it's actually, when you go to your booth, they're engaging with you. They're talking with
Mhm.
you and they're actually meeting the creator. And to me, QuiltCon is different, and it's the experience. It's not necessarily just a quilt show where we're going and buying fabric and getting on a tour bus and then coming back home. And so if you guys have never been to QuiltCon, I highly, highly, highly recommend. We were a vendor there 6 years ago, I think. It was fun. It was so immersive. The vibe, the community, it is great. And then you can go and say hi to Jennifer and say you saw her here, and that's even more fantastic.
Oh, yes.
All right. So this is a total geek question. So we're gonna math geek for a second. I think this might have come from someone else, but have you used Fibonacci sequence or the golden ratio to design any of your quilts?
That's a very fun question, and I have not yet.
Okay.
Um, what what has been holding me back is that those types of things will require some smaller, tiny pieces to make the whole thing work. And I try to avoid lots of tiny pieces because I don't want anyone to get frustrated with the pattern. So I'm still working out how I might be able to integrate something like that without having to deal with lots of small, tiny pieces. But it's definitely on my mind because you can tell from some of my pattern names, like some of them have math origins. So I definitely use some of that when I am doing design, and so those have been on my mind. I hopefully will get to them sometime.
Right. I was thinking about this question last night. It was Fibonacci sequence. I was like, and then of course there was a YouTube video. Like I feel like the world just knows the brain waves. Like if I'm thinking Fibonacci sequence, I'm fed a video. And it was talking about Fibonacci sequence, for those that aren't aware, is a side, then double, then it spirals around. And as you zoom in, it is the same pattern repeated as, and so that's what Jennifer's saying is you have to start really, really small to get something that would make a bigger project. And so I would love to see that. Like I would geek out on that every day of the week. My kids are Fibonacci sequence, golden rate, like it's all math in our house. And so I would love to see any quilts that you have that are based in math. We have a cutting board that's a Fibonacci sequence board. And
Oh, that's
like
fun.
it is our that's this plays well for us. Okay. So what was the biggest driver behind your decision to become a quilt designer? What was your like, I am going to do this? How did you get over all that doubt and all like, because that's that a lot of people are like, I could do it, but it takes work and there's doubt. So tell us about your process and how you got past all that.
I I think that a lot of it was just not knowing a lot of what's involved. So you go in, I went in a
So,
little
so you just
blind,
didn't
so I
know, and you
wasn't.
just like, I'm going to run off this pier, and I don't know, and it'll be okay. I'll
Yeah,
figure it out.
basically, like I again, I didn't know what I didn't know, and so I was like, so I'm just gonna write this in Microsoft Publisher and find some testers on Instagram and make it a pattern, and not as much thought went into it as you might think. And
Okay.
I originally I do a lot of cross stitch, and so I originally sat down. I was like, maybe I can design cross stitch patterns, but then I remembered how long it takes to cross stitch something, and I'm like, that's probably not going to work out. So then I went to quilting, and I had some patterns, some quilts that friends had said, this should be a pattern. You really should do this. And so that's, yeah, I think just not knowing what I didn't know helped a lot.
Yes. Sometimes that not knowing it completely eliminates all the fear and everything that holds people back,
Yeah.
right? They'll like
Yeah.
just jump in and figure it out. And I love all of that. That is fantastic, Jennifer. All right. So, what advice would you give to someone that wants to create 100 color modern quilts, but who doesn't have an exact pattern or design in mind?
That is a really fun question. So, 100 colors in a modern quilt. So, there's a few different ways you could go about it. There are, uh, for me, what like I said before, I tend to go with traditional blocks and then make them more modern. And color and fabric choice really can assist you in that. And so, one thing you might consider doing is getting. They have lots of encyclopedias of traditional quilt blocks. And so you could go through and pick 100 different quilt blocks and make them each a different color and make it a rainbow, which is also very modern. And go about it that way. For me, the color choices, the fabric choices really can stand out with that. Another thing would be to see what other quilt patterns are out there. If you're trying to do your own thing, then you don't want to go that route. But I would definitely focus on seeing if you can find traditional blocks that you like, that you can make modern with color choices, and then put together the whole thing in a sampler. Maybe that could be
Yeah.
something fun.
I think that does sound fun. 100 colors, like that's a lot.
It is a lot, yeah.
Right. I mean, even if you had a quarter yard of 100 different prints, right? How would you use that? And I think you're spot on. I've seen some Dear Jane blocks, which are similar concept, right? It's a lot of different blocks in rainbow, and they're beautiful, right? And I think there's definitely something. I like the idea of that traditional book because libraries are free. You can go get traditional quilt block books and check them out and figure out which ones you want to put together. That is fantastic advice, Jennifer. And I think so for whoever asked this question, 100 colors, wow. This is a quilt I want to see. Like let's progress photos the whole bit. Like this, I want to follow your journey as you go. All right. So I've been looking at comments. Everyone's questions have been answered. Jennifer, is there anything that you would like to tell us? What's next? What's new? So you were telling us that you had awesome quilt market. So what was the outcome of that? Great. It's
Oh
exciting.
yeah, quilt market was great. So this was my first quilt market that I've ever been to, and I had a booth. So first booth and first time ever even going. I had been to Quilt Festival before, but never to Quilt Market. And so I went in with the goal of just connecting with a bunch of people. I wanted to connect with the quilt shop owners and with the distributors and with fabric companies and fabric designers. And that was successful. I was able to go around to different booths, take little breaks from my booth and go around and pass up my card and say, I really would love to talk to you more. Please come by my booth and see what I've got going on over there. And the general reception was really really positive. My quilt patterns show very well because they're bright and fun, because that's just what I love, and that really can seem to connect with a lot of people there.
And what I love about that is you went to the distributors and told them to come find you, right? You weren't in your booth hoping that someone would come by. And I think, Jennifer, that's an inspiration, right? Like you got to put yourself out there. If you are willing to take a risk, like what's the worst they can say? No. Now you're exactly where you are today. And so the fact that you went out there and had those discussions and brought them to you. And so people are going to start to see your patterns in quilt shops all across the United States. It is awesome and fantastic. And I'm sure an amazing opportunity for you. And Jana Elliott has commented that you're such an inspiration and that you
Oh,
just
thank
sharing your
you.
story, you're such an inspiration for everyone. Like don't let anything hold you back. Just get out there. All right. So with that, I'm going to let you get back to work. So definitely if you love Jennifer's story and if you love her patterns, all of her patterns are on the Cotton Cuts website now. If you subscribe to our classic or to our modern maker boxes, there is still time to get in on this month's boxes. You will receive a free pattern download to one of Jennifer's patterns that are hosted on our website. Highly recommend. We put a blog post out about Jennifer with more information and how to find her. Lots of ways to find her and say you knew her before she was really big and before she became the next School of Pink, which would be awesome and amazing for everyone. So, Jennifer, thank you so much for your time today, and you have a fantastic rest of your week.
Thank you.
You got it. Thank you.